Some of these images were collected over the years. Some are recent, some we can talk through. This is a film with Terry Gilliam called 12 Monkeys. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know where I was on the 12th of December. Your Honor, I'm sorry. So, there we go. Bruce Willis, Madeline Stowe, this was the first film I worked with Bruce Willis, Terry Gilliam, part of the Monty Python. I will extend a little humor because I have about a minute per each, and you can stop me. But filming in Philadelphia, Baltimore, winter, snow, I had someone in the office go out and get a coconut about a month into the show, cut it in half, and I made 2 coconut halves. So some people have seen Monty Python movies. So whenever Terry Gilliam would come in the set, I would just clap the 2. The crew laughed, you laughed, I appreciate it because you've seen it. Terry Gilliam didn't laugh, not for being offended. He had no sense of humor about it. He just, it was a part of his past. So you can move.
Yep.
This is a more localized film, which was filmed in Troy initially and then down in the city. It was from Age of Innocence, Edith Wharton's novel, Martin Scorsese. This is Daniel Day-Lewis, the first movie I did with him. His first movie also with Marty. And then Michelle Pfeiffer. The costuming, all of the wardrobe was handmade in Italy and shipped to Troy, if you can believe that. The shoes that the extras wore on the streets walking around Troy, I was in a van on the first day, and I look at this guy's shoes, and I said, wow, those are really great for an extra. And he said these were handmade. And that was the attention of detail that Marty had for this film. I worked with him first on Cape Fear, but he was prepping this movie, Age of Innocence. All the time, all of the horror was going on in Cape Fear. He's in a corner with Edith Wharton's novel, highlighting sections and making notes. And then this was still Age of Innocence, Brooklyn Gardens. Just happened to be a moment that they were talking in between some of the setups that were going on. So not only are you shooting as the filming is occurring, you try and just capture moments in between. And the next one is the same as the extras, as I was talking about. That's on River Street, I believe. And the next one shows, help me, what is it, First Street? The one parallel to it?
Is that real snow?
No. It stops just about 50 yards in front of that carriage. If you can see it, it abruptly stops, because that's the length of it. But people have seen this and thought it was an actual period film. Is there anything you want to inject or ask?
Well, I can inject that we award, the New York State Writers Institute, on behalf of the governor of the great state of New York, awards the Edith Wharton citation for merit to the state author of the state of New York. So I don't know why I felt I had to interject that, but I did.
This image is Don Cheadle, a more contemporary movie directed by Antoine Fuqua. It's called Brooklyn's Finest. And it was a pretty grueling and pretty hard schedule, shooting in Brownsville, New York, projects, etc. And this was just one moment. Don, we were shooting on a rooftop of a projects, and he walks to the end, smoking between the setups, and I felt he was going to just exhale at some moment, obviously, and I waited, and this is a half a second of just holding the shutter open, which then causes the smoke to react like water when you see water cascading on a long time exposure. If any of this is too technical, you can just write the questions down, leave them on the table in the back, and I'm just kidding. And Ethan Hawke, worked 4 movies with him. Very serious, very good actor. I just heard recently he's wanting to get back to do some theater work, etc. But you can sense also the intimacy as well as this next shot. These are moments that, from my type of work, it's you have to be the fly on the wall, whatever description you want to say, and you have to learn how to get within that space and they have to trust you that you're not going to infringe on their moments at the time. He may be thinking, and if you just walk over and say, hey, I wanted to ask you, and they've lost their train of thought, and you're on a trip back to home, you know, and you've got someone else coming in to take over.
Are those sets really crowded? The studios, are they really crowded, or?
Presently they are, because now they shoot so much on location, and especially if you're in a tenement building in New York, it's like you're backstage. It's like, they said, watch the cables. I said, that's nothing. So you got to watch out for rats and everything else. This was from one of the first films when I moved here from LA to the New York area. It was for help me, my mind went. Bronx Tale. It's a musical now. So this was De Niro's first film that he directed, and I was previously working with Bob. I met him on Backdraft, and he said, I want you to move to New York and work for me. And I said, I don't want to move to New York. I had no desire. And consistent calling, and we did Cape Fear. He introduced me to Martin Scorsese, and he said, I still want you to move to New York. And I said, no. And then I got a phone call one time, and he said, this is it. You know, I'm going to be directing my first movie, and I want you here from day one. I didn't know day one also meant the prep time and all of the preparedness, because his attention to detail was immense. And we filmed from August until February. So you do the calculations. It was the longest film. It was longer than our film with Joe Connolly. So it was a long schedule. But it was just beautiful work that, again, all of these people were cast as characters. Bob would walk down the street and say, see that guy? He goes, we're going to use him. So they were not actors. And 90% of that whole cast was not making a living as an actor before this movie.
Well, what's your rapport like with Robert De Niro? I mean, is it strictly professional? Are you guys pals? Do you?
He's a screaming, crazed. The family's laughing. He's the most generous, giving individual to each and every member of the crew. He knows everybody. He can walk into a set with some crew members that he's worked with previously and come back and say, hi, Mark, and remember people. He's respectful of the space and time, if you are as well. And it's like any actor, they don't want to be delayed in their craft, to be challenged by something is not right when they're ready to come in and perform. Scorsese treats his sets like this platform, a stage. So he will wait for all the technical material to finish, the lights will finish, everything's done, and he says, now I need to work, as Bob does too. This is the area, this is the sanctum area that all of the craft is created. On a rooftop still with Don Cheadle, the next image. This was in an extremely dark bar in Lower Manhattan, in Brooklyn, and honestly, it was as dark as this back area. And I don't know how I got this, but I knew that because of the technical moment for it is the distance between Wesley Snipes and Don Cheadle is about 2.5 feet. So there's something called depth of field, and it wasn't going to work. Either he's in focus or he's in focus, the front or the back, if you understand those parameters of photography and trying to make things work. And I just said, this is a great shot. It's going to be a great moment. And a moment is what it was, because Don just turns his head once. So I knew I had to either take one or the other. But because of being versed enough digitally, I said, I know how to handle this. So one take, you focus on Wesley, and then at the precise second, you roll the lens and roll to Don Cheadle. And what I did was, I instantly layered the two together so that they would both be in focus. And I did it at the set. I showed it to the publicist. On a film, you will have a publicist who's always interacting, trying to get some kind of publicity or spin instantly on the movie. And this was like the first day these two guys were working. And I said, how does this look? And she goes, oh, this is fabulous. She goes, give it to me right now. She goes, I'm going to give it to the New York Times. And I said, wait a minute, let me clean it up. And I'm going to turn for a second. And not that your eye may be that close, but right above Don's hat, there's like a little crease where it just didn't line up. That 100% by my feeling. That back wall is just, that's why when I look at something and analyze it, it's like you ask anyone to look at your work after it's done. And I always look at that picture and my eye goes right to that back wall. And she just said, give it to me. It ran in the New York Times when it was actually printed material. It ran the next day. And they were ecstatic. And it was 2 columns and this and that. And everybody at the studio, everybody gets happy. And I said, yeah, but you didn't let me fix that. All right, Ethan Hawke, A Night Shot, same movie, more things. This next one's even, go to the next. This was from Cape Fear. This was supposed to be the poster shot for the movie. And we were filming in a set, which was a prison, if anyone's here has seen Scorsese's version of Cape Fear. He's the anarchist that comes after the family. So they were doing a strip search. I got down on the floor and I shot this very wide angle lens. Shooting film, so we had to wait till it went to the lab, came back. I used to sit with Scorsese to go through the prints, and Marty looked at it and he jumped out of his chair and he goes, that's it, that's the poster shot. And I thought, well, that's fabulous. And he goes, this is great. He sends it to the studio. A few weeks later, studio sends some people back to physically have a meeting with him, and they said, oh yeah, by the way, that shot's not going to be the poster. It's a little too edgy, and he always told me, he said, that's the best thing. He always thought that should have been the shot.
So is the poster in the slideshow? Because the poster is crazy eyes with a storm taking place. Yeah.
The poster ended up transitioning to, as Mark said, just eyes and some artwork of showing a boat and so forth, because the studio had that to say about how the poster was going to be created. But from that point on, Marty had pretty much, he still has the control to say what he wants to say, but on that one, he lost the battle, so to speak. But everything after that was pretty much his design. You know this. You've seen this beat to heck, haven't you?
We never get enough of it, I think.
Him on the bench, Tom Hanks on the bench, 5 days to shoot all of his sequence, handing the chocolate, the bus, everything. 5 days of him running, going through this. Day 1, he shows up and he sits down on the bench, and I leaned over and I said, you could ask the prop guy for a pillow. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, Tom, you're going to be on this bench for 4 days. It was a prop bench. It was wood. And he goes, and he thought for a minute. He goes, nah, we'll go without it.
And Hanks took out a full-page ad congratulating Phil and the program for the International Society of Camera Operators Lifetime Achievement Award. Big congratulatory ad. So he's obviously grateful for this work. And it's a picture of Forrest Gump, running and running and running. Right, it's his cross-country run, right?
Yeah. The running sequences, if you want to talk a little bit more about Forrest, the running sequences were done on the weekends. We were filming in Beaufort, South Carolina, Monday to Friday, and Friday night, it's called First Unit. The main company would shut down, and then they would have a weekend unit, and they would put people on a plane, fly them somewhere, and there would be another whole company of people, which is just as many as you guys in here. And they would shoot him running all weekend. Then we would fly back on Sunday night and continue shooting the movie. And this went on for 26 days straight. And it was Tom, the director, Tom's makeup, hair, wardrobe person, the director of photography, and me, and a video guy. No sound department. And it was like a military assault. We would finish on a Friday night. There would be a car, van for us, right to the airport, private jet, step off the next day somewhere. And the thing was, we did Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine in one day. Think about the logistics. Seriously, because we flew in to New Hampshire, then they had to get vans, then they had to run us back and forth, and they had puddle jumper planes. He would run, throw his equipment in a car, run to the next place, jump in a little puddle jump airplane, fly to the next location, have him running around. And months before, when it was all being planned, the producer came to me and said, Phil, he goes, you must know, we need some classic New England fall leaves kind of thing. He goes, you might know something upstate. And if anyone is in the Vermont area would know, Woodstock, Vermont, Route 100, there's a farm called, believe it or not, it's called Jenny's Farm, but it's Jenne. Does anyone know or any familiarity to that? And I told the producer, I said, go get the location guy. And they thought I was joking. I said, no, it's Jenny's Farm. I've been photographing it since I was 15. Big red barns, blah, blah, blah. It's got a nice path it'll go through. Get the location people, make the deal. Sure enough, they show up, and it happened to be about the second or third weekend, September, and it's the fall weekend. And we get there, and there are thousands of still photographers trying to get this famous shot. And it's actually listed as the country's most photographed barn. Anheuser-Busch has used it when you see the Clydesdales coming down the road. It's the same red barn where he runs in front of. And the producer says, thank you very much for giving us this location. He goes, but you would have not believed. I said, oh man, you just upset every still photographer. I said, they have people that come from all over the world to come get this shot. So, this is on an island in South Carolina with Bubba, and Tom was really holding him at that point, and Michael T. was a pretty big guy. So, he was pretty well fit for it, but a lot of the other stuff was, Michael was on a carriage that they could run with him. That's just a shot of me actually working in Montauk, as well as the next shot is an area in lower Manhattan. Somebody in the crew took that. He's trying to get pictures of me at work. The next shot is an actor, James Franco. This is probably a more familiar name now than when this was taken. He did a movie with De Niro called City by the Sea. He played De Niro's son, who was wrongly accused of a murder in a town in Long Island. And he came by the set one night. He wasn't working, and we were filming around 48th Street or something. And I said, James, I said, let me take a picture of you on Broadway. So let's just go take a walk over there. And he walked, and it was just a simple moment. It was a quick moment. And to me, it's just, is that not James Dean? And this was before he did the James Dean movie. And I just was so struck by it. It was just a quick shot. Anna Kendrick, what super professional. All of the, everyone you've seen so far, there's been nothing but professionalism. This is a special lens. This is no Photoshop effect. People see these kind of things. I always shoot the material where it looks like that because I was taught you have to get it on the negative correctly. You have to get it right. So my eye saw it as just focus on her and let it all go. So that was just a technical change to it.
And anyone you didn't like working with?
You'd never know. There hasn't been. I just prefer not to work with them if they're going to be difficult. If anybody sees anything or wants to yell something out in between. This is Paul Haggis. This is another of those moment where, you know, the emphasis of focus is on the director. Some directors, they will allow, again, that intimacy to interact and get this close and be around. Paul was that way. But it's a personal thing that you just have to be able to read somebody's body language and tell. And the compliment, I was just telling my son earlier, was like Helen Mirren. I had an intimate photograph of she and Al Pacino, and it was one frame. I've always been taught, why do you know, beat something to death? If you know you got it, get it and move on. And she says, I have no idea where you were and how you got any of these pictures, which is the better way to hear about it versus some other problem. This is Kevin Corrigan. that Brendan knows. And the reason for this one, too, was the spontaneity of a shot that I don't believe in letting anything perform it digitally. This is the actual flash from the gun. So you have to be timed when something's going to happen. If it's going to be a gunshot or explosion, you're going to get the moment. Why create it digitally and fake it out? Go to, another one, selective focus. This was a poster shot for film with J.K. Simmons 2 years before he won the Oscar. Another really nice guy. Oh, Olympus Has Fallen. This was a shot with a helicopter in front of a complete mock-up of the White House. We built, did anyone see Olympus Has Fallen? It was a very sad. So, Sarah. So there was an entire mock-up of the White House in Shreveport, Louisiana. And when I arrived, the producer says, "Come on, I'm gonna take you a ride and show you everything." The city of Shreveport gave the film company 500 acres to do what they want. So they built the gate, they built the 2 Marine guard houses, the front of the White House, a few interior pieces, and we ultimately and obviously blew it up and burned it. And I said, this should only happen in Louisiana to get away with it. And that's hanging out on the set. And this one was in the video, right under the lens.
So that's Scorsese at the camera, right?
Right,
And,
Marty?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, is it uncomfortable to squeeze under the camera like that, or is it?
I used to be as tall as you, but then,
I'm not that tall.
sometimes a director will have a monitor that he's looking at the shot being lined up, and Marty uses, every director has some kind of a television monitor, which is a signal that's coming directly from the camera, the film camera. And on Cape Fear was the first time the monitor was out, and I said to Marty, you need to go put your eye on the lens, go take a look, because I wanted to get a shot. Surely you want the shot of the photograph of the director looking through the camera. That's the shot. So every movie I've always tried to get him to say, hey, come on over and check this. So we do that. This was Matt Damon on The Rainmaker. He hanging on the set, just resting for a moment. The lighting was perfect. It's just a catch moment. And hence the name, The Rainmaker, which the photography on that was maybe the second to last film that I did that was all film and not digital. And Mickey Rourke. These were some local people that the Kennedys would have known. So then the next series starts the casino work. This was a film that went on from September until February as well. And it was the most stylized picture I've ever worked. Even though Age of Innocence was a period movie, this took place over such a span of time. De Niro had 54 wardrobe changes. If you remember the movie, he would have a shirt and a tie that was even made out of the same material, if some people would remember that. Each one of those costumes had to be photographed, all of the jewelry, everything, all the props, and it was a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful time. This just looked like an old Hollywood black and white still, where he was just reading his lines or something in between. This picture has been seen a lot. Marty and Bob in conference. This really relates, again, as far as a trust and an intimacy that these guys have, obviously, between themselves, but would allow me, and Marty would allow me to come in to rehearsals, which is unheard of in some regard. But I mean, the cameraman is with him, and they're lining up a shot, but no one would think the still person. And I remember early on with him, and I said, you know, I want to come in, and he says, oh, of course. He goes, you're going to get the best stuff right now, because that's when an actor is hashing out their work, and they're really trying to find their own character and their voices about what the scene is. And this is a very good moment with the two of them, and it's just, I don't know what they were saying, and it doesn't matter at that moment, but you can sense that it's intense. The next one is a picture that I received a phone call from Universal with a screaming photo editor on the line that they were ecstatic. And what happened was, this was in Casino, was the death scene. Sharon Stone's character walks about from here to the exit door, down a hallway, and then she just drops and falls. And it was gonna be a one-take moment, and I was sitting with Marty at the monitor, because this was gonna be a one-take thing, and I said, let me see what happens. And she walks down the hall, and she falls down, she hits the floor. And he says, well, and she didn't move. She didn't get up. He said, what? So he called cut. That's a signal that the scene is over. She didn't move. We're thinking something's wrong, something happened. And I said, go down and see what's going on. We're like two kids, go see. And he starts walking from here to that exit door, and I'm trailing behind. The rest of the crew is standing back, like, no one knows what's going on. I knew he was gonna go down and talk to her and see what this was about. He leaned down, one frame, I went click. Whether you guys can see it, you can see Marty's eyelash, his eyebrows, sticking out way ahead of his head, his forehead. There's a guy nodding, so. The photo editor called me up from Universal. She's screaming, ecstatic. She goes, you got it. She goes, that silhouette of Marty with the eyebrows. She goes, that was it. Sharon Stone just hanging out on a mirror shot in Casino, and she knew that I was doing that, to have the two images of it. This is a rehearsal moment. This is Marty deciding what kind of a shot he was going to get of Sharon, close up. This is Bob De Niro from The Score. Again, just looking for, pools of light, hitting faces. All you need is a head turn, something. People are gonna move. They're gonna always have a lit mark that they're standing on. Oh, is that it for me?
No. I wasn't communicating with you. I'm just checking time. Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. This is from The Score with Edward Norton and De Niro and Marlon Brando. When you hit the next one. This was, I have the only images say that the two of them are together in the frame, in the movie at the same time. And this was the last movie Brando did before he died.
What was it? Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah.
The nicest individual, however, he was overweight, and everyone had concern. You can't tell from, I don't think you can necessarily, from that picture. And this was a moment that in between the setups, Marlon was walking around and he was tap dancing over in the corner of the set, and he was singing Guys and Dolls. It just, no one was around, that he's like, having a little moment, and you just went, this is amazing. And he was very light, his feet were moving, and it's a sweet moment. He doesn't look like the person who everyone was portraying that he was. What are you, cold? Oh. And then the next shot, he's reading his lines. He walks over to a part of the set. It was a nightclub. He's reading his lines, and you can see off to the corner of the frame, there's a guy standing there. As if you can see the half outline of a gentleman. It was a prop guy standing there. So I took that frame, and then I went, get out the way. And then I took one with him out of the shot. And everyone that I've shown both to, they've all voted for this one, because that leaves that image of another person back there. But this was just a fabulous lit moment where it wasn't, where the scene we were filming was all the way on the other side of the room. But this was just Marlon reading his lines. This is Bob walking back. As I said in the video, a return to one moment. We filmed him walking away from camera, but I knew he's got to come back. So then you wait, and he turns around and comes back. This picture made more sense to me. Pardon me.
Are you often shouting for people to get out of your way?
No. No, not really. But if you can anticipate, if you can feel that someone's going to move on their own, then you don't say anything and just let it kind of walk away. This was on The Score with De Niro and Brando and having just a secondary shadow, which they were filming a close-up of him, but I was thinking to myself, oh, you're missing the shot. There's this really beautiful, secondary shadow on the wall. And then there's Bob and Marlon together. We have, we did this scene for a good part of the day. We set up, which was non-traditional kind of filmmaking. They set up 2 cameras, meaning if we're gonna film a conversation between Mark and myself, one will shoot Mark, one will shoot me. And so that way it cuts down the work day in half, so you don't have to keep flipping a camera back and forth. So when we set this up with the 2 cameras, I remember telling the cameraman, I said, I'm gonna get on Marlon Brando's side and I'm gonna shoot Brando because I don't know how many takes he's gonna do. And I've already done at that time probably 16 movies with De Niro. So I said, I can get Bob's coverage and I know I'll be safe, but I said, I'm gonna stay on Marlon. And he did one take that I'm not gonna do an imitation, but he would get into Brando being Brando, and he does a gesture where he taps his chin. He did it one time, and I just blasted, and I was shooting film at the time, and I was doing this guy's laughing. I did one whole roll every time, and I just said, and I turned to the focus puller on the camera next to me, and I said, Tony, that's the one. I said, that was the shot. And we were like kids. We thought this, because his gesture was just so 1950s Brando. And he, it just hit the moment, hit it.
That's it. Applause.